Thanks for that reminder, Kimberly.
Mhm. Okay.
I've got
Well, I
you
think
and
we
Kela
should
spotlighted.
say welcome, everyone. We are going to be talking about studio policies today, and I hopefully share some information with what works and what doesn't work, and give everybody some ideas and some things to contemplate. So we're going to have everybody just introduce themselves. And Kela, I'm going to ask if you would mind starting us off.
Hi, I'm Kela Walton, and I'm just thrilled to be here with seeing so many familiar faces and all of my harp teaching friends. I live in Arlington, Texas. I teach at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, both at the university level and in their music prep department. I also teach privately, and I have been teaching for more years than I would care to admit, both privately and in the public schools as well.
Okay.
I don't know what else you want me to say in terms of an introduction, but
No, I think that sounds good. Mary.
Oh, I'm Mary Radspinner. Nice to be here. Nice to host this. Um, and I have a handful of students, both piano and harp. And I love to attend piano teacher seminars like this, which is one reason I kind of started this because I learned so much from the piano teachers. And I thought, well, harp teachers should be sharing these kinds of wonderful things also. So that's, I hope that you guys all get something really great out of this. I know that I'm going to.
Therese.
Hello.
That's yourself. Hello there.
Hello, I'm Therese Honey, and I'm looking forward to talking about harp studio stuff and learning from Kela and everyone that has thoughts to share about studio information.
Yeah, and I'm Kimberly Snoffer DeRosa. I've been teaching for over 30 years-ish, and I've taught harp and piano, beginning and intermediate piano. Most of my teaching is privately, but I also direct the Harp Journeys Festival for Adults and the Houston Summer Harp Festival Camp each year. I've taught all levels. Um, uh, including university. And Kela, you have Suzuki background too, right?
oh yes, yeah,
And
that's important.
Therese also has Suzuki background.
Oh yeah,
So I think that's gonna be an additional aspect as we talk about policies today. Thank you, Mary, for organizing all of this and for Melody's sponsoring this gathering. Okay, so Kela, we're going to just jump right into fee structures and how do you structure your fees? How do you set that up? How do you collect? What's your way of doing things?
So I've taught both for schools and privately, actually taught at a Suzuki school. So if you are working with a school, you don't have a lot of control over this, obviously. But if you are teaching in a private studio, there are lots of ways you can go about doing this. I personally like to be paid in advance for the lessons. I also like my students to think of their lesson time as their time, and it's not that they are paying me per lesson or per hour, but like this is our standing appointment. And so I like to pay, have people pay monthly. So you can, if you're meeting the students weekly, what I do is I just map out, this is how many weeks I'm going to teach in a session. And then I figure out how much I want to get paid for that. And I divide it into equal monthly payments. And they just pay the same thing every month. It's so much easier for my personal budgeting. It's easier for their budgets. And there's no, oh, well, there were 5 Wednesdays this month, but next month there's only 3, and all of that. Like, it just makes it simpler. I also have some students that I don't see every week. And for those, I offer what I call a package. They're floating lessons, so that doesn't mean they get the same time every week necessarily, or whenever I do see them, it might be on a different day. And they pay for groups of either 2 or 4 lessons, again, in advance. So that the reason for doing that is that it just makes it so much, then I don't have to go chasing people for owed money. I don't like that feeling. And so I just want it to just be taken care of in advance. Is that what you're looking? Oh, Kimberly's muted.
How do you keep track of it? Are you recording who's paying when and all of that, or?
So I used to just keep a good old fashioned free spreadsheet, using, Google Sheets or whatever. And that's, you have to do some bookkeeping and take some time to do that. And then I recently found a service that will do this for me. And I can set people up at different rates. So for example, I have an online student in New Zealand, and I don't think it's fair to charge Texas prices compared to New Zealand prices. I would like my prices to be compatible with what they would be paying for a harp teacher in New Zealand. So they pay their rate, and it's all kept straight in this program that I use, and it bills them automatically. They can pay from their bank or through a credit card. I still have a couple of students that'll pay me by check, and for those students, they pay for the entire session up front, actually, which I forgot to mention. There's a small percentage that do that. And then the same thing with the packages. This program will sell the package of lessons, and it keeps track. They've had 2 lessons, and it automatically bills them for the next 2 or 4, whatever they've chosen to pay in the group of 2 or 4. So yeah, it's worth it. It costs about the same as it would to teach roughly about a half-hour lesson. So for once a month, one of my lessons I teach it just covers that. So, and it's worth it for me because I have a really hard time switching gears from all of my teaching thoughts to, oh yeah, you owe me money and you take 45-minute lessons. And so that costs, yeah, it's just a huge waste of everyone's time and brain energy for me.
Yeah, so which one? I know there are a lot of different billing apps that are out there. Which one do you use?
I like to use Fons, which is spelled Fons. It was originally started by a guitar teacher, so it's specifically for music teachers. And I found the customer service to be excellent. I started early on with this program when it was pretty new. And they've always been able to answer any question I had within a day and help any of my students that are having problems with setting anything up, which is pretty rare these days. And I believe that the Suzuki Association now has a partnership with them. So there's a reduced rate for Suzuki teachers to use Fons now. It's brand new, just announced this week, I think.
Oh, wow.
But there's others out there too. So feel free to research, and maybe something else is better. What's also great about it is it sends reminders to the students. So they get a reminder email. And so if they're an online student, the reminder email can have the link that they're supposed to use for the platform online. It can remind them, hey, your lesson's on Thursday this week, and yeah, it's very helpful for that. I don't have to do that either. All automated.
Right. How about you, Mary?
I use, I'll try to spotlight myself here, maybe kind of sort of add spotlight. I use my music staff. I looked into Fonz. I thought it was great. And I just did not want to learn a new application. I was so used to my music staff. I quit using it a year ago because I was trying to save money, and I switched all of my scheduling to Google Calendar. And then I used this free app called Wave, and it is, I forget, it's a free app, and it's sponsored by Merrill Lynch, I think. And it uses typical nomenclature that an accountant would use, which personally confuses me. But I used that for a full year. And if anyone wants to use something that's free, it's very, very good. And then the Google Calendar was great, but the scheduling on my music staff is just so easy. I can put the kids in the calendar, the program keeps track. It does send out a reminder email. I can invoice them, and I can even ask for their invoice to have an email sent to them saying that I've received your money, that kind of thing. So I just got used to it. The one thing I don't really like about my music staff is I don't think the kids, there's a portal. And I think that it's hard for the kids and the parents to get into the portal. And so I just don't use that part of it. I just use it for my own record keeping. And I wonder why I quit using it for a year, because I think it's $14.95 a month, and it keeps me a little bit more sane. So that's what I use.
Mhm. Mhm. Therese, how about you? What do you use?
I have used an app in the past, but I have a very small studio right now, and I am not using that. My payment schedule is because I travel a lot. And I haven't used the sort of the semester pricing. I only use the month pricing, but the last lesson of the month, we look at our calendars and we see what's going to come up over the next month. And if I give them credit for any missed lessons that were canceled appropriately, and we figure it out right there. And most of the time, they are paying me with their credit card. I still use a Square reader for payment. Nobody's writing checks to me anymore. I have gotten cash in the past.
Lost you.
Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Oh, okay. I thought you said you lost me. They're still using I still use a Square reader. I have gotten cash in the past. I think that covers it.
Okay. All right, great. I've tried just about everything through the years that I've taught. I've tried, billing by semester, where they can pay one up front, or they can pay, part of it up front and part of it in the middle. I've tried when you walk in the door, you pay me. I've tried monthly, and it because I have enough students that each want different things. It just got to be where it was exhausting. And so I have also gone to a billing app, and I forget which one I tried first, Duet Partner. And then I went to Fonz, which is the same one that Kela mentioned that she's using. And the time that it's given me back to not have to keep track of who's paid and if they've paid and make up lessons, it has been completely worth it. It helps me out so much. I have gone since last year. I had some professional mentorship, and so I think a lot of the music studios are trending now where they're doing a monthly subscription. And that was a big leap for me, but I did take it a year ago. And I kind of figured out about how many lessons I do during the year, about what I would normally charge. And that's kind of how I came up with my price. I divided it over the 12 months. It took a little bit of explaining to the parents, because, some of them who travel in the summer more are like, well, but we're not going to be having lessons then. Well, but I've figured it out with nearly, 12 weeks of time off during the year to allow for holidays, to allow for summer. And it's actually a little bit more affordable monthly for you now, because I'm spreading that cost out over the 12 months, as opposed to having some months where they have a lot of lessons, and that being more. And just trying to keep up with the surprises on their end of how much they owe me that month. So I'm really glad that I made that leap last year. I use this for my school age students. For my adult students, or for students who are not based more on a weekly schedule, for them, I use Fonz and have them set up to just be paid per lesson. There is the package option that Kela had described. And for me, that was just one more thing in my mind that I just couldn't have in my head. It's another good option to have, and you can have different students on different pay plans. But with the pay per service, everybody has their credit card on the app, and it charges, if it's per lesson, it's like an Uber ride. It's going to charge at the end of the lesson time. So I don't have to worry about that. And honestly, it helped me to stabilize my summer income as well. So the one student I have who is gone a good part of the summer is also the one student who is auditioning for region, and I'm going to give her some extra lessons or some longer lessons to help her prepare for all region. So I feel like it kind of it really has helped me a lot, just take away from the not so much fun keeping track of the accounting. As far as my rates, I also revisited my rates a year ago. And one of the things that I did do was look at what some of the music schools were charging, um, and just kind of see what I've been charging. If I hadn't raised my rates for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years or 20 years, everything is going up. And I think we need to be brave in saying, yeah, we want people to be able to afford lessons, but everything is going up. And if you are teaching as part of your full-time income, then you deserve a raise too. So I'm going to just make that little plug.
I'll
All
jump
right.
in on that
Yeah,
same
go
topic.
ahead. Anything else?
I try to reassess my rates every other year.
Mhm.
So people who've been in my studio for a while, they know that the rate is going to change at some point, and I try not to do it to them every single year. But if you give yourself just a little bit every other year, it's much more manageable. It's not a big shock versus jumping $5, $10, every 5, 8 years. Like that's a little bit harder for everyone to swallow. So that's how I do that.
Yeah, I think especially if you're looking at per lesson, but I also looked at, holding my prices for so long and thinking I'm doing everybody a favor. And then the shock value of I do need to raise my prices. I made the choice this year to raise the prices about 3%. And I think I'm going to try to do that each year so that in 5 years, I don't find myself so out of whack with what everything else around me is costing.
Yeah.
Therese.
Yeah. I like Kela's idea of just everybody knows it's going to be every other year. There's going to be a change. When I have raised my prices, I usually start telling them I'm not on, I like Kela's schedule. I might adopt that. But when I am going to raise, I start giving them notice about it 3 months in advance or something like that to sort of get them used to the idea of the prices being raised. One time when I raised my prices, one of my students said, oh, I'm surprised you didn't raise it sooner. You should be charging a lot more.
Mhm.
That's great.
Yeah, we often hem and haw about this, like, oh, should I do this? And what you're thinking about everyone else and how it's going to impact them. And I have yet to have anyone just be like, I'm out, I can't do this. That's ridiculous. Like it's always like what Therese said. It's always like, oh yeah, you should have done this sooner. This is great. We think you're awesome.
And I just raised my prices and I didn't even tell one of my students, and they paid. I mean, I sent out the invoice at midnight, and by 7 in the morning, I got payment, and there was no question about it. So
Yeah.
I think that
And
didn't
and
matter.
having said that, I still have some students that I have on scholarship. I understand a little bit about what the family dynamics are there. And because I have myself set with the others, I feel like I can without feeling resentful or starting to feel a grudge about teaching them. I want to be able to enjoy teaching them. And some of them, it's worth having a partial scholarship or a scholarship for some of those students that would not be able to do it otherwise. If you have any questions or please remember you can put those in the chat, and we're going to just try to keep track of that as we go along. And then we're going to leave some space at the end for some comments and some questions, because I know everybody does this differently, and I'm sure there's some more really great ideas that are out there. Okay, yes, as far as scholarship, somebody asked, how do you determine scholarship students in a private studio? Sometimes the parents will share with me, and that, that they're not able to pay a certain amount. So a lot of times I'll deal with a student that way by either saying, well, let's go from a 45-minute lesson to a half-hour lesson or something like that, or I'll end up charging them a half hour. Sometimes I'll still give them the 45 minutes if the student's really applying themselves. So I think sometimes it comes from the family, from the parents and their concerns. I would, if anybody's talking about, look, we're not going to be able to take lessons for a while, then I definitely want to open up a conversation with them and ask, especially if it's an engaged student, and ask them, is it funny if there's something financial that I can do on my end? Can we go to every other week? Can we go to a shorter time? You can ask some questions that aren't too imposing, but if you can tell that they're really sorry about having to think about pulling back, or the student just loves it and they would never just want to quit, then I try to have an open conversation with parents. I know, Mary, yeah, I know you have had scholarship students as well. How do you determine that?
One student, I knew that the mom was having a hard time paying. I could just tell. And I said, I'm not gonna charge you for the next couple of months. And mom was very happy. And now they're paying half. And I'm
Yeah.
happy with that because I love this student. She's a great student. And I was talking to Molly Ness one time, and I was telling her how I have a couple of students here. I'm going to add my spotlight. I was telling Molly Ness that I have a couple of students that I don't charge for, but I started describing the students, and she said, man, I would teach those students for free too. Sometimes you just have a really good student. It's like they give you energy because they work so hard and they're so cute. So it's all that's kind of how I determine it. I can tell when they're not able to afford it, and I just go with the flow on that.
Yeah. How about you, Therese? Have you run into any of that with your teaching?
A long time ago, I did, and for a limited time, I did a work study program, and they would come to my house and they would do filing for me. Not, never housework, but business stuff, filing or taking an inventory of my CDs and books, that sort of thing. But
Tuning
something
your
related
harps.
to business. Yeah, tuning harps or changing strings. Yeah. Yeah, something to do with harps or harp business. Yeah.
How about you, Kela?
Same. I've had a few students like this, and it was sort of a combined Kimberly and Therese approach where, they paid for a slightly shorter lesson, but I still gave them the longer lesson. And about once a month, they would come and just help me put music away because I'm a terrible piler. I just pile it all up. So
I have no idea what you're talking about. I have no idea. That never happens to me.
So we have another question in the chat regarding fees, as far as if you teach just in your home, or do you make house calls? Kela, does that change your rates, or do you even offer that?
I no longer offer going to students' homes for a couple of reasons, but I did in my early teaching career, I did that. You want to make sure if you're doing that you are insured, that you have general liability if you're going into someone else's house, especially. And there's also the travel time and the gas and all of that. So yes, I will occasionally go to a student's home if they are wanting help with some string changing or something like that, or if we're getting ready for a recording and they want to try different spots in the house or something like that. And that's definitely at a higher rate because you're spending time and gas to get there for sure.
Grace or Mary?
Mary,
Sorry.
Oh, Mary, sorry.
Nope. I'm looking to see if we have any other questions here.
Well, while she's looking for that, I'll say, I do not travel to their home unless, say, they get a new harp, especially a big harp, and they want me to come look at their harp. You know, I might just drive by if I'm in the neighborhood. I don't charge them for something like that. But I do not go to their homes because it blurs the dynamic between teacher and student. And yeah, that's all I'll say on that one. Yeah.
There are two schools that I go to. I do not add extra charges for that because those students are coming through the middle schools, the district. Going to a student's home, I will complimentary, no extra charge. If it's within a reasonable distance, go to the home if they get a new harp or something like that, where I want to make sure that they're in the right position and sitting at the right place on their instrument in their home. And since that doesn't happen often, I don't mind doing that. Plus, it's just kind of fun to see a new harp. I have done some in-home lessons in the past. A lot of times that really depends on what my schedule's like. And if I'm booking my afternoons back to back with students, I'm not going to have time or the energy to go to a student's home. But typically I did have an extra fee for that lesson. And sometimes it was half what the lesson fee was. I figured if they wanted to pay that, then I wouldn't mind going. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well,
Jane Jane Hyde said there's an organization that helps students and teachers negotiate rates. Did I miss that while I was going to plug my computer in? I don't know, but it's called foundation.org.
Music Link Foundation.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Jane. That's good. And I'll
Right.
send this on the follow-up. And then there was someone else that wanted to talk about their structure. Do we want?
Peggy.
Peggy. Okay, Peggy.
Hi, I give lessons in students' homes as well as in a room that I have at church set up as my studio. Couple different reasons. One family has 4 kids that take lessons, but they have a dog. And I'm allergic to dogs. So the kids come. All of my students are either homeschooled or adults. So piggybacking on that, my yearly structure is not semester by semester. I'm gone sometimes, the homeschool families are gone, the adults decide to take a trip. So I have to be very, very flexible with mine. And because of that, many of the homeschool families do not use credit cards. So they pay by check or by cash. So those are my 2 options right now. And as far as going to a student's home, if I'm teaching more than 1 student in that home, I give a discount for the second and the third students, even though it's the same amount of time for them, but they don't have to come to my place, unload their instrument. I don't have to move locations. Everything is all neat and tidy right there. So that's just a brief overview of my somewhat looser structure just because of circumstances.
Yeah.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you very much. I do go to one of my students' homes. There's 3 little boys. And I do charge extra for going. But I figure the choice was they either wanted to do on Zoom because their parents are both dentists and they work 7 days a week, or I could go to their house, which is about 7 minutes from my house. And I thought, I am just going to drive around the corner to their house. And that worked for me.
Yeah, every situation is
It's different.
Yeah. And even within my studio, there's not everybody fits into it exactly. So I think we all kind of have to figure out. I think the main thing is we have to figure out what works for us. And if the schedule or the billing is wearing you out or frustrating or taking too many too much time outside of the actual lesson, then it's time to just sort of reassess, which is where I was last year. So, okay, let's move on to policy agreements. This should be a little bit easier to go through. With the policy agreement, do you present a policy agreement to your student or the family? Do they have to sign it? How often do you do that? Or do you just, is it a verbal agreement? Kelo, why don't you start us off?
I started using like written studio policies and a formal teacher parent student agreement in 2004. And I got this from other piano teachers and the Suzuki world. And I found it was really helpful to just review that once a year. So the beginning of, August, September, whenever your year starts, January, whatever it is, we would go through it and just, there's a little reminder, as a student, these are the things I'm supposed to do. As the parent, these are the things I'm supposed to do. And as the teacher, these are the things I'm supposed to do. And we all sign it, and it happens once a year. And obviously, if you're an adult, you're both the student and the parent, it all applies. So, and I've been doing that since 2004. And it works well. It's just a nice little reminder.
Do you make exceptions for certain cases?
The agreement is so basic. I'm going to follow the policies. I'm going to wash my hands. It's one page, the agreement. The policies are a lot longer than that, but if they don't want to do those things, then they don't need to be in lessons. Like with me, I'm not the right teacher for them. So, and I have not had anyone had a problem with it. I separate out any kind of photo release, internet release, recording release, that sort of thing. That's a separate thing. So there's a little more flexibility there. But in terms of I agree that I'm coming to lessons and this is how lessons are going to work. Yeah, there's no exceptions.
And why do you include a photo or media release?
Well, because I teach minors and I don't want to get in trouble with their parents, or I want to be very careful about what I post that belongs to my students. So they have the option of saying yes or no to me sharing their image, or sharing just their image but no name. I give them the option of saying yes or no to a group thing, so you can't identify which kid is theirs. There's 6 kids in the photo, okay? And the same thing with recordings, video and or audio, because I think you should have some autonomy over how you are presented on the internet.
Mm-hmm. What do you do, Mary?
I'm probably not the best person to ask because I'm very careful. I don't put my kids on Facebook. I have not done that. And before I do that, I really didn't have a policy with a media release, but I am going to do that. And but I have about a 1-page policy. Are we talking about if you don't show, how to charge for missed lessons and that kind of thing?
Yeah, just so that it's an understanding and not just, them miscommunication. I think it just whatever policies you need, so there's not miscommunication if there's a missed lesson, how they're going to be billed, that type of thing.
Yeah, I just tell them, if you're going to miss a lesson, I need to know 24 hours in advance or you will be charged. Mm-hmm. That's probably the main thing that's in my policy right now. I'm pretty loosey-goosey. That's why I'm attending this meeting right now. And that's why I wanted to get other people's input, because I am loosey-goosey.
Yeah. Therese?
Yes, I do have a policy agreement. It has many of the things that everyone has been talking about. As I need to do a media release thing at Kela. Thank you for bringing that up. In the past, when I have taken a photograph of a minor, or a video, it's just of their hands, never of their face. And but I like the idea of a media release. But yeah, I think the media release is important for adults as well, because I know of a student in the DC area who works for the US government in national security, and she absolutely does not want her photograph ever and her name ever associated on social media. That's very, very important to her. And so it's important with adults too. And some adults are just very private. They don't want that sort of thing as well. And I respect anybody who does not want their things, you know, their selves on the internet.
Mhm.
You know, speaking of that too, I do tons of videos for my students, and I always put them on my YouTube channel as unlisted. So all of my students, if they're on, if I video them and I put them up for other students to see, it's always unlisted, and my lessons to them are unlisted. So I mean, I bet I have 100 YouTubes on my channel that nobody can see because they're not available for public consumption.
Yeah, good. I have a policy that I like to have signed by families. I have it, if it's a new student, I'll present that to them at the time I meet them. I usually do a complimentary lesson or consultation before I set up charged lessons, just so they get a chance to meet me and we get to see if we might be on the same page with things. But at that point, I do that, and I also hand them or email them my bio so that they have more of my background as well. But on the policy sheet that goes out every August, you know, as lessons are starting out for the fall for school age students, and the photo release, I do ask the parents to sign that, just to have things covered. If they don't, or at least let me know if they're going to, if they give permission or not, but something back so that I have signed. I don't really post a lot of videos or pictures, but occasionally at my recital or something, I will put a group shot. I just think it's important that, again, the parents, especially with minors, that they're involved in what images might be out there of their students. So Jackie on the chat said I have a hidden Facebook page, so you can't find it if you search, and people have to be invited. That's another really good way to do that and keep everything a little bit more controlled and not just out for the public. I did a private Facebook page for our Houston Summer Harp Festival participants, in case there were you know, students that wanted to share photos on that. It was just shared within our group. The unlisted YouTube is another good way to do that. But yeah, I like to have the policy reinforced because I might tweak it from year to year. I like it reinforced once a year with everybody, even the ones who have been with me for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to clarify, even though the agreement for mine is 1 page, the policy is like 12 pages. It's a lot of stuff. And that part changes, but the agreement stays the same every year.
Yes, I've seen yours. You're very thorough. But gosh, you have pretty much everything covered. I think every situation that might come up. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to everybody's big question: rescheduling and cancellations, missed lessons. Kela, what do you do with that? What is your policy?
So for my weekly students, I have built into the week, much like Kimberly was talking about, I've built into my calendar just make up lesson weeks. So say if we're working in semesters, you know, a typical semester at a public school or college is, you know, 16 weeks or whatever, 17 weeks. I don't teach that many weeks. I teach 14 weeks. And that gives us room to make up lessons and skip lessons and whatever we need to do. So I just keep track of they've had this many lessons. And once you hit 14, you're done. If you want more than that, you can pay me for an extra lesson. But, you know, it works. And I just do 3 sessions per year based on that. For my students that float around, obviously there's more flexibility about scheduling, and 36 hours notice, and you get 1 makeup if you've had some sort of emergency, I'm a reasonable person. And if you have a reasonable reason why you needed to miss the lesson, then great. If it was because you forgot you scheduled your dentist appointment, oh, well, I'm sorry, that's too bad. Like that sounds like your calendar issue and not my problem. But, you broke your ankle on the way to the lesson. Okay, no problem. We'll figure it out, So it's at my discretion a little bit there. And I also travel and gig and do things. So having not a full, not committing to a lesson every single week that I possibly could teach gives me the flexibility to go do those other things that ultimately make me a better teacher because I'm out here performing or doing this other thing.
Yeah. Mary, what do you do? Oh, hold on. We've got a question for Kela real quickly.
Yeah, I see that.
Do you give one makeup lesson per year or?
Per session. So each session of mine is 4 months and you get one makeup within that session.
Mary, what do you do?
I, like Therese mentioned before, I pretty much go month by month. And like I said, I'm a little on the loosey-goosey side. But if they've got a pretty good excuse for not being at the lesson, then I give them credit for the lesson. And to be really honest with you guys, you know that I've had a very interesting past couple of months. So if a student cancels, sometimes I'm like, oh, good. Stay home. I have so much paperwork to do. So right now, at this point in my life, sometimes I'm okay when they cancel because I can get some other paperwork done that I have lots of paperwork going on right now. So I just kind of let it ride.
How about you, Therese?
I have a 48-hour cancellation policy. However, I am flexible, as others have mentioned. Houston is very spread out and we have a lot of bad weather and it rains a lot and streets are flooded. And I do not want any student, trying to rush to get to a lesson because there's street flooding, so that, or whatever, that sort of thing. I am flexible about it, but just having the policy. And I don't recall ever having a student object to having to pay for the missed lesson because they understand that I am flexible. And I have to be honest here about, in the past, there have been some times long ago where I forgot that there was a rescheduled lesson. I teach on these days of the week. These are the only days I teach, but somebody just insisted on having a lesson on one of the other days. And I don't look at my calendar to see what my teaching schedule is on a Thursday because I don't teach Thursdays, and they show up at my house. Maybe I'm not even home. And, that's embarrassing. And I give them their next lesson for free, because I think that's the professional thing to do. So if, it's my fault, so I should do that. That hasn't happened in a couple of decades, but I do have that policy.
Yeah. So my policy with it, I don't have my policy here just to read exactly, but I have a 24-hour cancellation policy. With the adult students, I'm probably even more flexible, but I'm really very flexible. But I do have the clause in my policy at the discretion and convenience of the instructor. So I'm not obligated to try to reschedule their lesson. Most of the time I do try to accommodate people, which makes my schedule a little bit more hairy sometimes. And if it gets too much like that, then I have to kind of tighten things up a little bit again. Especially beginning of the school year when everybody's trying to settle into all their new activities, that can get a little jumbled up. I had 2 students last week trying to find yet another different time for their weekly lesson because of the clubs and everything finally getting into their schedules. But that's what I do for that. And this is where, again, some of these apps like Fonz and Music Teacher, they have not just the billing system, but they have the scheduling system too, as Kela mentioned, where it sends out a reminder to the parents and the families or the adults that their lesson is coming up so that it's not as easily forgotten. And you can also show your availability on the schedule so that if somebody wants to put a request in to change their time, it's not all the back and forth, the phone calls or the texts, and you still have the control over to accept that change or not. It means that you have to keep your availability updated. Like if I scheduled somebody a friend's lunch, then I'm not going to be available on Thursday at 1 o'clock like maybe I normally am. So there's a little bit more maintenance with that, but you can place the controls also that you don't have, like you won't accept new requests within a 24-hour period or whatever you decide that you need that request by. So the only other thing I want to mention with makeup lessons or scheduling issues is that I have in my policy that up to an hour before their lesson time, either one of us, well, I think they can change it to online lesson. So if they're running crazy or somebody had a bad day at school, then I offer the fact that they can do it as an online lesson. And that's kind of helped the consistency, I think, too. If I have students that are missing, I will also give them a video assignment where instead of feeling like I have to make up a lesson, they have to do the video assignment and I'll review that. And it may just be like 2 lines of one of the pieces, but just something to show that they're still having some accountability and they're still getting feedback from me, but I'm not necessarily scheduling, trying to do makeup lessons on a Saturday afternoon, which I don't want to do. So there are some options there, I think, as far as dealing with rescheduling, offering the online instead of in person if it's a last minute issue, or giving a video assignment and giving feedback on that.
Yeah, I also offer the option to switch to an online lesson, especially if like a sibling is sick and we just don't want to share germs, but the student is totally fine and ready to have a lesson. My policies also include just whatever the local school district does for that student. So if the local school district has closed for an emergency weather situation, we're not going to try to have an in-person lesson. And we can hop online if you want or not, depending on if you have power or whatever the situation is. And I would just like to say about all of these things, the point of having the policy is so that if you need to enforce it, you can. But as the teacher, like Kimberly said, at her convenience and discretion, if you want to be a little more relaxed about these things, because this is not the normal behavior for this student or it's an extenuating circumstance, then you have that right. And I try to explain that to everyone. Like, yes, these policies may seem very strict, but they're here to help everybody get what they need out of this relationship. And, if we can be a little more flexible about them, then we can try that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm kind of thinking at this point, Mary had mentioned that we maybe do a part 2 on policies, because I think there's still some other things that we can talk about, but I don't want us to run out of time if there are questions or comments. So Mary, is this a good time, Therese, y'all think to open it up to some questions or comments?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Sorry, Therese, didn't mean to step on you there.
Good idea.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. And then my handout for insurance, I can just make that part of the follow-up, which I will do.
Yeah, we can even touch on that next time in the next session. Because
Insurance was very interesting, just by the way. Doing research on insurance is a little interesting, so. Okay.
Yes, yeah,
It
Mary wanted to go over some information on insurance and carrying that. So I think we can plan on another, maybe our next month's second Thursday. What are we? Second Thursday of the month. we'll continue with the insurance and some other issues. Anybody want to share or have a question? I know y'all do things differently than we do. Stephanie, you want to come off mute?
Yeah. So I have a one-page policy also. Things like washing hands, I just do that verbally, and they come in the door and they learn. You know, if they forget, I just remind them to wash hands. But a one-page policy that they sign and I sign, and I give them a copy of it. And several years ago, it used to be that if you give me a 24-hour notice to cancel, you're fine and you get credit for that. Or if you reschedule, if you have a last minute cancellation, if you reschedule within the same week, you're fine and we're even. But one of my students several years ago taught me about a lovely loophole. She had a Monday lesson scheduled, and she called on Monday to reschedule her Monday lesson for Wednesday. And I said, fine. Then she called on Tuesday to cancel her Wednesday lesson. And I went, oh, so I still basically got screwed out of a lesson at the last minute. So I just updated my policy going forward to say, if you give me 24 hours notice or reschedule within the same week, you're fine, as long as you don't cancel or reschedule your next lesson. Because if you go ahead and cancel or reschedule your next lesson, then you still need to pay for the lesson that was missed. Another example of that is if somebody has a Monday lesson, they reschedule for Friday, they do show up on Friday, but then they feel like, oh, it's only 3 days till Monday, I'll just cancel my next lesson. So, you know, then I'll have a little over a week. That's, to me, that's still the same as I missed out on one lesson. So that's been working for me. And definitely having them sign it and giving them a copy, and we keep a copy. They take that more seriously than if you just tell them your policies, because this is our business. And so it's important to act business-like, and then they respect it. I've found. I haven't had any wheedling or complaining. You only have problems with the students that don't read the policy. And then later they say, well, I didn't know. You know, you insist on watching them while they read it, see if they have any questions. And that's been working out well.
Great. Thank you for sharing that.
Can I share something?
Yes, thanks.
Okay, so my name is Ashley Crossland. I am a professional harpist down in the Gulf Coast of Alabama, and I recently opened my studio down here after living in Atlanta for 10 years. So I noticed that Stephanie had a question about teaching multiple students at the same time. And one of the things that I do down here that makes me unique to my area is I offer group beginner classes. And so that has a really structured format where we have weekly lessons and we have a specific curriculum that I created to go through each week. And so when I was figuring out how to price for that, I needed to make it cheaper than what a normal lesson would cost, but I also needed to make more money because it is a lot more work to teach 2+ students in the same lesson. So when I had 2+ students, I needed to make 20% more than what my normal rate would have been for that time slot. And then 3+ students, I'm keeping it the same. So I end up making significantly more when I have 3 or more students in the class. But my workload also goes up because I am preparing for each one of those classes a lot more when there's more than 2 students. And then the energy that is required to teach 5+ students at once and be chipper and happy and super attentive to each of them requires a lot more effort. So I am compensated for that. And just to keep in mind that you are worth every penny you are charging, and you probably need to be charging more.
Thank you.
I have taught a 6-week introduction to the harp. I had small lap harps I rented them to the students. And at the end of the 6-week program, if they wanted to buy them for me, they got whatever they paid for the rental was applied to the price of the harp. And I had a specific lesson plan. And some of them, this has been a long time ago. Some of them continued on as my private student. Some of them did not. And at the sixth class really wasn't a class. It was a recital. And I have a large room in my house, very informal recital. They could have their family and friends come and listen to it. And yeah, if you teach more at once, your hourly rate actually is higher. But I like the idea of having a 20% off, when you had 2 or more. I like that idea.
Well, and to speak to Stephanie's specific question about 2 students that want to start together, I've often started beginners in little pods, and it's really fun when you do that. And the way I did it was the lessons overlapped. So it wasn't that the lesson was, an hour of everybody all together. It was maybe they each got 20 minutes of individual time and then 20 minutes together, right? So that takes up a whole hour. And so you can figure out how to charge based on that. And it worked really well so that they do get their group instruction, but you can also then individually address things.
Mhm. Good. Anybody else? I know, let me make sure anybody's just wave to me if you have anything else. Bonnie, did you want to say anything or add anything? You're on mute. You're still on mute.
Okay, now I'm off. Yeah, he said waves, so I did. But I've taught multiple students. I had twin boys one time, and I thought, oh, how is this going to work? But it actually ended up being fabulous. I've never seen 2 so synced together playing as we did group pieces and stuff. So it does work, but you're right, it does take a lot more energy.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Well, some of the things that we didn't get to that I think we'll talk about next month is group lessons was one of the topics. I think there's probably a little bit more we could discuss there. How to structure the policies around the group lessons. Is your student responsible for buying their music? Do you buy it for them? We're going to have a discussion a little bit on that. Mary's got some information about insurance. And then I think, just kind of talking a little bit more about taking command of your private studio as a business. If this is a source of income for you, what are the ways that we can all do to just support this a little bit better as our income. I don't have it structured the same way that I did 25 years ago. Times have changed, students have changed, technology has changed. And I think, there's just a evolving standard to really have more respect for music teachers, because the soccer teams still get paid, the ballet studios still get paid. And how do we fit into that as primarily a one-on-one type of elective? So we'll get into that a little bit more next week. Mary, Therese, Kela, anything else y'all want to say?
Thank you, everybody, for being here. This is so fun.
Thank you so much for joining us, Kela. And thank you all for being here. Thanks, Mary, for organizing it. And Therese.
And the follow-up.
Yes. Yeah. This will be, the recording will be posted, and Mary's always really, really good about getting that out quickly. So. All right. Well, happy teaching.
This was great. This was great. Thank you. I'm sorry I can't text. I'm driving. This was great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Me
too. Thanks so much. This was wonderful.
More topics. We'll get to them next time. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
See you next month.